Hi, and welcome to Anne's Family Recipe. Today we're making our third and final York Fair inspired treat, cinnamon buns. I can't go to the York Fair without getting dessert. I don't have one sweet tooth, I have all sweet teeth. So between the waffle ice cream sandwiches, the pumpkin funnel cakes, and the whoopie pies, there's something for everybody there to satisfy your sweet tooth. My favorite are the cinnamon buns. I also have lots of experience making cinnamon buns because a few years ago I ran a business out of my home kitchen. It was called Nice Buns Home Bakery, and I would make homemade cinnamon buns and sell them at my local farmers markets. So I did that for 2 summers. I would make big ones, miniature ones in all different flavors. So today we're going to try and replicate the cinnamon buns at the York Fair as best as we can. To make the dough, we're going to start by adding 2 cups of whole milk into this large mixing bowl, and this is microwave safe because we're going to pop it in there in a second. Then we're adding 1/2 cup of vegetable oil. That makes them nice and tender. And then 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. And I'll take my wooden spoon and just mix that all together. And then we're gonna pop this mixture into the microwave. I'm gonna heat it up in about 30-second increments until it's warm but not hot, because we want that warm liquid to activate our dry yeast. So what I have here is a candy thermometer, and I can use that to test the liquid. You want it to be somewhere between about 110 and 120 degrees. So I'll let you know exactly how long it takes in my microwave when we're there. My mixture was in the microwave for exactly 2 minutes, and I checked it in 30-second increments, and then by the end I was doing about 15-second increments. So I have 1 packet of active dry yeast, which is about 2 1/4 teaspoons. I'm just going to sprinkle that all over the top of my warm milk mixture, and we'll let that sit for a few minutes, and it's going to start to get a little bit kind of foamy and bubbly, and then we'll mix that in and we'll add the next ingredients. You can see that the yeast has started to foam up on the surface. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So now we're going to mix that in and add in our flour. So I just took a second to mix the yeast into the liquid, and now I have 4 cups of flour here that I'm going to gently add in. So I've mixed it until the flour is incorporated into the liquid. Don't be alarmed, it's going to be pretty runny still, but there's more to add after this rises for an hour. I'm going to cover this with a clean kitchen towel and put it in my oven, which is not on, but it's just a great place to prevent any drafts or temperature change when you want a dough to rise. So we'll cover it up, leave it in there for an hour, and then I'll show you what it looks like. I let my dough rise for about an hour, and you can see it's puffed up nicely. We're going to start with an additional 1/2 cup of flour, so we'll just sprinkle that on top. And then we're going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of salt, and about a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon to give the dough a little extra cinnamon flavor. So I'll sprinkle that in and then mix it all up. This dough is still pretty sticky, so if you're going to work with it right away, you're definitely going to need a little more flour. I'm going to put mine in the fridge for a little bit just to firm up. It makes it a lot easier to work with. You can even make this dough the night before you're going to make your cinnamon buns, and then it'll be really easy to roll out the next day. I just took my dough out of the fridge, and now that it's chilled for about 45 minutes, it's a little bit easier to handle, but I'm also going to definitely flour my work surface. So we'll start putting flour all over the counter here. Plus I'm going to flour my rolling pin. I love these French style rolling pins. They're really easy to handle. I'm going to flour my bench scraper too. You could just use a knife to cut up your cinnamon buns, but this is a really handy tool. It's very multi-purpose, so we can cut the buns with it, we can use it to transfer them into our pan, and I can even use it to help clean the counter when I'm done. Here's my dough from the fridge. I'm going to add a little extra flour on top of that, and then I always have more if I need it. So we're going to transfer the dough out of the bowl onto the well-floured work surface. Okay, so I have a little bit of a square shape going on here, and I added some more flour. Our rolling pin's ready to go. So we're gonna start rolling this out. Now, typically when I roll out my dough, I roll a very wide rectangle that's kind of narrow this way, but since the cinnamon buns at the fair are gigantic, I'm gonna try and keep it more square shaped today and see if we can make extra large cinnamon buns. So to create the incredible filling for our cinnamon buns, I'm going to start with about half a stick of softened butter. And obviously this is going to be a little messy, but totally worth it. So actually, I probably shouldn't rub it like that. I'm going to dot it all over the top, and then I'll kind of smear it in. And now we'll just kind of work it in to the dough a little bit. Smear it around. Oh, it's going to be good. So the surface is totally covered in softened butter, and I use unsalted butter. I always do that when I'm baking, then I can control the amount of salt that I'm putting into my baked goods. I'm gonna go wash my hands, and then we're gonna add the cinnamon and sugar. So I smeared about 3/4 of a stick of softened unsalted butter all over my dough. Next, we're gonna add a half a cup of white sugar and a half a cup of brown sugar. So I'm just gonna sprinkle this on all over the surface. And I have a picture I'll share with you of them doing this at the fair. They have this huge piece of dough and they're just showering it with sugar. Definitely enticing. Maybe you want to try it the first time. I think I'm going to stop there. So maybe like 1/3 cup of white sugar, and we'll do the same with the brown sugar. So I'm just going to kind of scoop it out with my hand so it's not packed. We want to sprinkle it evenly all over the surface. I like adding brown sugar in with my white sugar because brown sugar is a mix of white sugar and molasses, so this adds a little depth of flavor. All right, so we're covered in sugar, and now I've got my cinnamon here, and I'm just going to sprinkle it all over the top. And now it's time to roll our cinnamon buns. So I'm going to start at the far end here and just fold over the top. And then I'll just go back and forth. So now I'm going from left to right and rolling it over, and then back the other way. Kind of tucking the dough underneath itself so you get a nice tight cinnamon roll. You'll have that quintessential swirl in the middle. And we'll just keep going back and forth until it's all rolled up. So the last thing I'm going to do with the edge here is kind of pinch it together. So we'll lift up the edge and pinch it just to kind of keep it shut. And next I'm going to slice them up. So I'm going to do about maybe like 1 inch width. We'll just go down the line and cut our cinnamon buns. I have a 13x9 glass baking dish here, some more butter on my hand, and I'm just going to generously butter the inside of this so they don't stick. If you don't want to use your bare hand, you can pick up the butter with a paper towel and just rub it into your pan too. That works just fine. But I'm already pretty messy, so I'm going for it. And now I'm going to add the buns into the pan. I don't want to overcrowd them, so we'll see how many fit here. Looks like we'll do little rows of 3. I'm going to let the buns proof for another 15 or 20 minutes while my oven preheats to 375 degrees. Then we'll bake them off. I let the buns rise for another 20 minutes or so, and you can see that they've kind of puffed up a little bit. So next, this is totally experimental, so you don't have to do this part, but I noticed in my old photos of the cinnamon buns from the fair that they have this kind of crunchy cinnamon sugar crust on top, so I want to try and recreate that too. So I have a little dish here with about 2 tablespoons of sugar and just about a teaspoon of cinnamon. I stirred it up, and I'm going to sprinkle that all over the surface of the buns, and we'll see how it looks when they're baked. As I said before, my oven's preheated to 375 degrees, and these will probably bake for about 15 to 20 minutes. I'll start checking them after 15 minutes. It's a little bit tricky in an oblong pan like this because you really want those middle ones not to be gooey anymore. You want them to be cooked through. So I'll use a little wooden skewer or toothpick to kind of check the inside of those to see if they're cooked through. And I'll let you know how long it takes in the end. When I ran my own cinnamon bun business, I used to top them with a vanilla glaze, which was delicious and it kept them super moist. But my favorite way to top the cinnamon buns is with cream cheese frosting, so we're gonna make that today. In my mixing bowl, I have 4 ounces, which is half a brick of cream cheese that is completely at room temperature, nice and soft, and then 1 stick of unsalted butter, also at room temperature. So I'm gonna whip these two together so they're nice and creamy, and then we'll sweeten it up. My cream cheese and butter are nice and fluffy, so now I'm gonna add 2 cups of powdered sugar, one at a time, hoping not to make too big of a mess. So there's 1, and then I'll whip that together. The last ingredient I have to add to my frosting is about a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then we'll mix that in. My cinnamon buns baked for exactly 18.5 minutes in my oven at 375, and the recipe made 16 buns. So this tray holds 12, and then I have another 4 just in a little aluminum pie pan baking in the oven right now. The kitchen smells incredible. It's so cinnamony and delicious. I'm gonna try out a cinnamon bun. So I have my little spatula here, serve one up. And then at the fair, it's still a mystery to me whether they just put straight up butter on top, which is totally fine with me, or if they do some kind of frosting. Now, what they do at the stand at the fair, they take a little cookie scoop. I'm gonna take a big dollop. Okay, I'm gonna overload my scoop here because I need more than just a tablespoon of frosting for this. Put a little dollop on top, and these are still warm, so it should start to ooze a little bit. And we'll give this a taste. Get some frosting. Oh, these buns are so fluffy. Oh my gosh, these are so good. Wow. This is my favorite recipe for cinnamon bun dough because it's always light and fluffy. It's never dry, and cream cheese frosting just can't be beat. We're just gonna spread that all over because I'm about to eat all of this. So good. Thank you so much for joining me in my kitchen this week for my tribute to the fabulous foods of the Great York Fair. I'll see you again soon for some more family recipes.
For the full recipe, check the description box below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen.